Despite being delivered in a 90-something degree Carolina summer, my Aeroworks 60 Freestyle Extra 260 came in with hardly any wrinkles on it. And the packaging had done its job and everything showed up in perfect condition. Aeroworks suggests going over all the joints with some thin CA, and this is a simple thing and a good idea. With gasoline engines, we know there's going to be a bunch of vibration, and this might save us a problem down the road. Aeroworks gives you these templates for drilling the motor mounts, and they cover a lot of motors. We have to glue in the pin hinges in this model, so I began by putting some melted Vaseline on the joints to protect that from the epoxy. I coat one side of the hinge with epoxy and put that into its hole. When the hinge seats, I bring the other leg upwards. And then I use a small square to make sure that the hinge is exactly 90 degrees to the surface around it. That just makes sure that we don't have any hard spots or binds in a control surface movement. Aeroworks gives you a nice aluminum tailwheel assembly, and a friend noticed that I have the short arm on top of the long arm instead of under like it should be, so we changed that at the field before we flew it. You get a nice painted aluminum landing gear with this plane, but you can buy a carbon fiber set if you'd like. I've learned not to put the wheels on a model until I'm nearly done with it so it doesn't roll off the table on me. I found a template that matches my DLE 61 mounts and taped that in position. They put guide mounts on the template and the motor box itself, so all you do is line those up and the motor gets placed perfectly every time. There's quite a bit of thrust angle on this model, and if you line these up right, the motor comes out perfect in the cowl. I use thread locker on everything associated with a gasoline engine. And you have to pay attention to the mounts because only one side is meant to be up against the firewall and the other ends up against the motor. Aeroworks puts a removable cover on top of the motor mount that makes it a lot easier for getting the motor mount itself installed and for installing the throttle servo. I held the motor up to the mount and realized I was going to have to change the throttle arm to get it to where it pulled to open. They screwed this arm on so you can change it if you need to. I like to put any graphics on around this point because it's a lot easier to get through everything with the plane laying on its side. You don't have the tail feathers in the way. And once again, all the graphics I put on this plane came from B&E Graphics. I don't like using those plastic safety clips on permanent connections. This is one of my elevator servo extensions, and I like to use shrink tubing on these. Once you shrink the tubing, there's no way that this connection is going to come apart, and plus it doesn't snag on the frame structure while you're stringing the wire up to the receiver. Aeroworks supplies this piece of cardstock plus these templates for making the cooling openings and clearance holes around the engine. Just follow the instructions as they're written and you'll get a cowl that fits right. More importantly, it lets out enough air to keep the motor cool. In a few days, I had the plane ready to go and out at the field for its maiden flight. I really wish all of my maiden flights went this easily. As soon as this plane breaks free of the ground, I could feel that it was very stable and very straight just the way it was. And that made me kind of brave. It needed a couple of clicks of right and a couple down, but that was it. It flew straight and level. One of the things I do on all of my maiden flights is to shoot some approaches right away just in case I need to get this thing back on the ground quick. And this is where I first discovered that this extra doesn't need a whole lot of airspeed to fly. And it doesn't mind being upside down even at slower speeds. It was a bit windy for this, but I still could see that the extra likes the elevator too. Just a little bit of motor keeps the wings pretty steady. And I was happy to see how docile the extra is, even at my wide open full rates on landing. Touch and goes, even in some wind, is just fun with this plane. Most of the time I was just having fun with this plane and often forgot about the cameraman trying to document all of this. This is another much windier day. We had gusts well over 25 miles an hour, and I was getting more used to the extra, and the elevators were getting better yet. I'm certainly not a 3D pilot, and my D&a-half skills are showing up here in this wind. But even as slow as this plane is up in the wind, you can see how effective the rudder and everything remains. Something that surprised me even more is even in this wind, the extra is very stable on landings. It does bounce around, but when it gets down within the last 4 or 5 feet of the ground, it seems to smooth out and handle real nice. I put a Vest 24B prop on it for this flight, and it seems to like it a lot. It's got very good vertical, and it pulls good from a standing start. I like to know that a plane has enough punch to pull itself out of something if I screw it up trying to hover it. This is the next weekend, and I decided to try the Sullivan Smoke Rider pump that I had installed, and that seemed to work just fine. I have it mixed to the throttle, and it's supposed to shut off when I pull the throttle all the way back, but I think that needs some tweaking, but it still looks nice. This is also using the stock muffler that comes with the DLE-61, because it's got a smoke nipple built onto it. I've seen motors quit when the plane's upside down with the smoke on, so I thought I'd try this a little higher and faster. I think we're starting to get a little low on smoke fluid by this point. One of my favorite things to do at an airplane is a knife edge spin, and the Extra does that well, and it looks great doing it with smoke on too. And I'm also happy to say that it recovers very well. And in case you can't tell, I really do like flying this Extra. Well, I like the nice still days. The windy days aren't bad at all with this plane either. We were having gusts well over 20 miles an hour in this last day of video, but I could still throw the plane around and that Extra would come out of it nice and easy every time. I realized that the Aeroworks 60cc Freestyle Extra 260 isn't going to make you or me an instant 3D pilot, but it will make learning a lot of that stuff easier and safer for the airplane because it recovers so well. And just between you and me, I got better at a lot of this stuff when I started flying this Extra. And for the folks that are already good at 3D stuff, you're going to love this airplane. The Aeroworks 60cc Freestyle Extra 260 is an easy plane to build, it's an easy plane to set up, and it's really easy to fly. But I do have to warn you that you're probably not going to want to stop flying it, even when the cameraman wants to go home. The good news is that there's always another day.